Hey, you. Can I tell you a secret? I'm actually from the future, and I've traveled back in time to tell you that these first couple episodes might sound kind of bad. And that's because we were just starting out. So for episodes 1 through 6, the audio quality isn't as good. But don't worry, as most things in life, it gets better. Starting with episode 7, the hottest sports entertainment thing in the world. And once again, this is a reminder from the future. We have social media now on all major social platforms: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, if that's your thing. And just wanted to remind you to give us a follow, a like, or even check us out. Now, I'll get out of your way and go back to the future and let you enjoy the episode. Have fun.
Before we get started, if you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Let us explain.
Anchor has the tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast straight from your phone or computer.
When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more.
It is everything you need to make a podcast in one place.
And best of all, Anchor is totally free.
Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the first episode of Searching for MacGuffin with your hosts, George,
Gabe,
And Link.
You're probably wondering who we are and what we're doing here. So we thought we'd take this first episode to introduce ourselves and a little bit about what we're about. So we're going to go ahead and start with...
My name is Link. I am 28 years old. I'm a native from Miami, Florida. I'm an INFP. I'm also an anagram 9. I have no idea what that means. I just took a test and it said I'm a 9. So I assume it means that in a scale from 1 to 10, my hotness is a 9 out of 10. So, yes. I'm also a Taurus, so that means I'm a young bull. I like to watch TV and anime.
my name's Gabe. I'm 25 years old, also a Miami native. I enjoy playing sports, listening to music, watching movies, TV shows, anime, and playing video games.
And my name is George. I am 37 years old. I am an English and drama high school teacher, and my interests include musical theater and professional wrestling. I had this idea for creating this show because I grew up along with these two gentlemen here who are my family, consuming this media, these stories. Gabriel is my nephew. Link is my brother-in-law. And we grew up from a very young age together. And we would spend time not just watching and playing and reading, but also discussing the minutia of it. And if you're part of any of these fandoms, you know what these conversations are like. But the one thing that we always gravitated towards is the importance of the stories. Now, they're just pastimes. They're hobbies, and they're not too serious. They're fun. But the reality is that the narratives that we interact with shape our philosophy. The morality tales shape the morality choices that we make in our lives. And for those of you who are aware of what the MacGuffin is, the MacGuffin is that object that drives the narrative, that thing that the characters seek to obtain or to find. And when we look at the MacGuffin, we're really looking at what the driving force for the narrative is. Now, sometimes it's important directly to the story. Sometimes it's just a means to an end. But that's what we're looking to find as we deconstruct some of these stories that we interact with. What is the driving force of the narrative? What is that thing that drives not just the characters in these stories, but us? So, in order to do that, first, you got to kind of have an idea of where we are as individuals. So we thought that the way that we would do that is by focusing on these first couple of episodes in these areas of interest. Now, we're going to be talking about a lot of different stuff in the weeks and seasons to come, but we whittled it down to these 5 important categories for you guys to understand what it is that kind of drives us or where our tastes lie. So I'm going to let Link introduce each of the 5 categories that we'll be exploring in the next couple of weeks.
Yes, so for today's episode, we're going to be talking about comic books. After that, we're going to move on to video games and anime, TV shows, and movies. And from there, who knows what we're going to do afterwards. But that's how we're going to introduce our show. That's how we're going to introduce ourselves, who we are, what we like. And so you get to know us a little bit better and relate to us in a certain way.
So when we were coming up with how we were going to construct these lists, these different areas of media of entertainment, we gave each other kind of like a blank canvas. We gave each other a lot of room, a lot of personal choices as to what comprise these lists. And in the weeks and seasons to come, you'll see how those lists differ and how they can relate.
Yes, in each list, we talked about our top 5 favorites. Personally, I chose whatever produces the most joy, whatever sparks the most joy in my heart, like Marie Kondo in my list. So there's some movies that are probably better than the movies in my list, like The Godfather is probably better than all of them, but these movies produce joy. They spark joy, and I love them so much. So that's how I ranked my list. That's how I organized my 5 list of everything of these 5 categories.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because when I was creating my list, I kept going back to some of the things that I experienced in my youth, and so much of it is established early on. So there's probably like a bunch of stuff that I even think is better, or might even, if I really am honest with myself, like enjoy more. But there might be like 10 games this year that are better than like a game from before. But I would never play these 10 games if it wasn't for that game. So that's kind of how naturally my list started being formed.
Yeah, I can definitely agree on those, both of you. Definitely it comes on a personal level with how I ranked them, with how I valued them. Depending upon how young I was when I watched something or experienced something for the first time, but also the kind of like the shock factor, what the lasting impression that the piece of content left with me.
So with that in mind, I want to focus on today's episode. We're going to be talking about top 5 comic books, and we'll get started with that right now.
All right, with that being said, I want to start off with my list of top 5 comic books. The first one, and I think we all have, I'm not sure. I think I know I'm going to say this, and this person's going to be on your list, so I know we're going to have to talk about it. But in my list, I have 2 Batman graphic novels that I love.
Yeah, for sure.
Agreed.
Right? Okay, I know you guys so well. I knew you guys had some Batman there, right? So for me, my 2 favorite Batman graphic novels are Batman Black Mirror by Scott Snyder and Jock, and Batman Year One by Frank Miller. I love those 2 comic books. They are great. In my opinion, I think my favorite Batman story arc is Black Mirror.
Bold choice.
Right? It doesn't even have Bruce.
Yeah, Bruce Wayne's not even in
it. Exactly. And it's funny because I went in thinking, what? Bruce is not in this? This is going to be stupid, right? But I didn't know who Scott Snyder was, who I think might be one of the best Batman writers at the moment. Well, right. Like him or
Tom King.
Right
now.
But I would put him up there with like all the Batman writers. I think he's great.
Yeah, I mean, some of the stories that he's written in the past couple of years definitely are like instant classics. Instant classics. Yeah. Well, yeah, Court of Owls. That it's so like iconic.
Yeah.
Like now it's just like a part of the Batman mythos now.
Yes.
In just what was his name?
Scott Snyder.
Scott Snyder. What else has he done?
So
American Vampire.
Yeah, American
Animal
Vampire's
Man.
very good. Yeah.
And after
his Animal Man's very good too.
Yeah, I don't know.
He's not the one who he write on Swamp Thing.
Oh,
he's the one who writes Swamp. Yeah, no, his Swamp Thing is very good too.
So I think Scott Snyder is my favorite Batman writer. I love, like I said, I didn't think I was gonna like it because I didn't know who this guy was, a new writer. Mm-hmm. Also, what Bruce isn't in it? This doesn't sound like a good idea. I thought I was gonna hate it, but then I read it and I'm like, boy.
Well, that one thing that drew me back into comics, and that's like every like 10 years or something, or every 6 to 8, I'm not sure. Like there's a new wave that gets me back into. But when the New 52 came out, I was like, okay, this is a jumping on point. I've been here before. I know what these like crisis events are. But Snyder was writing Batman from the what was then the number one, right? And that was one of the things that really, and I think he hit a home run for the next couple of years there.
So yeah, so I should love it. Like I said, I didn't think I was gonna like it, but I might even say I love Dick Grayson as Batman. I'm like, man, he's up there, bro. He's up there.
The other thing you brought up was the fact that you were like, oh, a Batman story without Batman. Dick Grayson is Batman. That's so dumb. And I think sometimes, like as fans, we hear about a take or a plot or whatever new, and we reject it like
Blasphemy.
Right away.
Yeah. And no, man, I'm glad I was wrong.
Heresy.
And then I like I said, the other one for me is Batman Year One. I just love stories that are really focused on Lieutenant Gordon or Commissioner Gordon. He's one of my favorite characters. I love Gary Oldman as Gordon in the Dark Knight trilogy.
Yeah.
I think he's great. He did a great job personifying the character. And when I think of Gordon, I just think of Gary Oldman.
Yeah. Well, don't sleep on Gordon. I mean, yeah, in those movies, in the comic books, in the animated series.
Oh, he's amazing.
Yeah. Gordon's a great character.
But yeah, so those are my two Batman ones. What about you, Gabe? I know you have some Batmans. Knowing you.
Yeah, so kind of piggybacking off of the Year One, the one that made my list was The Long Halloween. And also following Batman in his early years. And I really like that one just because it follows kind of like that trinity with Gordon and Harvey and Bruce and Batman and them never crossing the line. And it was just over the course of that year and then them taking on crime, they're taking their own approaches. That for me was very satisfying and just one of those Batman stories that it stays with you.
It does.
And the second one that I have is The Dark Knight Returns. This one, I read it. I attempted to read it as a kid. I picked up the book and I wasn't a big fan of the art. I remember seeing this art's kind of weird. I don't know. I felt very mature.
I felt because I didn't like the way Batman was drawn in that one.
I mean, swole Batman,
fat swole Batman,
middle age,
like Ben Affleck's Batman.
Yeah, exactly.
Batman Diesel. Yeah.
But yeah, The Dark Knight Returns and just that whole story and kind of the themes that come out of it for me that really also stayed with me. I think as I eventually as I matured and I grew older and I was able to understand and look read between the lines and see the different themes of the story. That's also those two for me round out my list for Batman, at least for comics.
One thing I love about Long Halloween is Tim Sale's art in it.
Mm-hmm.
It's so great. I'm like, oh man, this guy's amazing.
I love Tim Sale's art so much that he did artwork on the show Heroes on NBC.
We got it all.
Yeah, and I bought I just bought a hardcover book that has. Well, actually, before the hardcover book, I printed it all out online and created.
Yes.
I had a binder just full of full color printout and I did that at home and my parents were like, where'd all our color ink go? Yeah. And then they came out with the hardcover and I bought it again because of just to have the still images. His art is amazing.
So good, man. Cool. Interesting fact, he's colorblind.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
I think I heard that, but I forgot it.
Man, he's colorblind stuff.
So to continue with the Batman theme, so I cheated when I made this list because I knew that if I included Batman books, it would just be a top 5 Batman books.
Yeah.
So I chose Batman. That's what I wrote down on my list. But I knew that you would balk. Go.
So you chose Batman.
Yeah, I just chose Batman because I kind of see the character.
Character.
Yeah. So no, it's not all encompassing, but it's his run from the inception of the character to now. So much of it is iconic. So when I was thinking about Batman, I was thinking about Year One. I was thinking about Long Halloween. I was thinking about Scott Snyder, Black Mirror, Death of the Family.
Hush.
I was thinking about Hush. I was thinking about Dark Knight Returns. I was thinking about the Denny O'Neill's run, which is a big influence for me because when I was growing up, those were some of the first Batman books I read, in my time in the 90s. He was writing Green Arrow. He was writing Batman. He was writing the name escapes me now. The Question. And then he was like tying those three books together, going back and forth. And for me, that was such like an iconic time for me. But if I had to choose one book to represent Batman, the one that I would choose is The Killing Joke. The Killing Joke. Because I think when you do a top 5 comic books, 2 of the names that show up on the list a lot are Frank Miller and Alan Moore. Yeah. And for me, this is where Frank Miller's Batman Year One and Dark Knight is obviously shapes, what we know about Batman. But The Killing Joke, and the same reason you guys picked Long Halloween and Year One, is like those early days, but from the Joker perspective, and the insight that Alan Moore and the ambiguity that the story has on like, is this the origin? Is this not the origin?
Right?
Yeah. What does it mean? Those last couple of panels.
Yeah, that's pretty ending.
So for me, that was like the first time I felt like, oh, comic books are grown-up stuff, and this is serious. So another good thing that I like about these titles that you guys selected is like they have pretty good animated adaptations. Like I like the Year One film. I like the Dark Knight Returns, the 2-part film, and with the exception of the intro, I like the bulk.
You love that part.
I love the bulk of The Killing Joke animated.
Which is a Batman animated movie where he goes through, like they throw a car at him and he just goes through it.
Oh, that's
that was great.
The Red Hood.
Red Hood,
That's,
yes.
Under the Red
Under
Hood.
the Red Hood. I think that might be my.
And that's a good movie too, man.
Yeah.
And that's a good story. That was another one. That was when we were talking about concepts. I heard, Jason Todd is back, and I was like, this is stupid. He's back from the dead after all these years. So
when you bring back,
and it is kind of in the story. It is kind of a cheap way, but everything we get from the Red Hood character from the years after that, I'm like, okay, no, it's worth it.
But that's kind of, I find that those things interesting when you go into it and you're just like, you really don't have any expectations, and you might even like look at it from a kind of like, I don't think this is gonna be good, and then it ends up being a pleasant surprise.
Yeah.
And I feel like those types of stories, with the writing or if you watch the animated movies, I personally enjoy those experiences a lot.
Yeah. That's a whole other topic for another day. Those DC animated movies, I feel like they don't get enough play.
They don't.
Definitely.
Yeah, there's so many of them are so good, and I don't know if they have like the general audience that they deserve.
And Bruce Timm is a man.
All right, but moving on to your next pick.
All right, so I know we talked about Batman, so I'm going to deviate a little bit from the popular stuff, and I'm going to talk about an indie comic. Although it's very popular because they turned it into a movie. But one of my favorite graphic novels is Scott Pilgrim. I grew up reading it in high school. I remember reading it in high school and having to wait because my friend Pookie was lending it to me and having to wait in between each issues. I'm not sure what they're issues or graphic novels.
They're graphic novels. Yeah,
having to wait in between. But I loved Scott Pilgrim. It's such a fun story and it's so different. Like it's not as serious as a Batman, right? As a Killing Joke. But it's beautiful. It's very simple. I love how simplistic the art is. It's not Alex Ross or anything like that. It's very Brian Lee O'Malley. It's very simple, fun story, lovable characters, relatable. Especially if you're in high school. Like when I read it, I'm like, man, I'm like Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah, right. Because I got this put in my hand because of you and because of our friend. But like you guys were in high school and I was a little older, and I was like, oh, I like it. It's good, but I think, man, if I would have been a couple of years younger, it would have really resonated with me. With that being said, though, the film adaptation really made me appreciate it even more.
That's what got me into, like, that's why I started reading it. I mean, I saw the film with you guys, and I was like, man, this is awesome. So, Michael Cera, Chris Evans, I thought it was Edgar Wright, correct?
Yeah.
Edgar Wright did a great job with that.
Edgar Wright, the best movie, in my opinion.
Wow. That's another one. You got some hot takes.
Hot takes today.
Have you read the colorized version?
No, I haven't. I should because I want to go back.
Yeah, we have it.
I know.
I own it.
Just haven't gotten to it.
Yeah,
but
the next time it's your read, you should do it because I mean,
maybe I'll do it this week.
Yeah, because the film is so colorful that it's like I imagined it, and now that he went back and recolored it, and it's like such a bright palette, like it really pops off the page, and obviously it was in black and white because of.
I do remember that. I remember actually. That's a good point. I remember struggling with it because I went from the movie to the book, and I was like, man, this is like obviously the story's good, but like it wasn't like necessarily as visually appealing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, the covers pop.
The covers
and then
pop
you go into it,
and it's like, okay,
And I think I remember like on the last graphic novel, like the first 2 pages were kind of colored, and then afterwards it's not. And I was like, I thought this was gonna be all colored. But yeah, that's Scott Pilgrim for me. It's up there.
All right, so we went into your little indie comic. I'm gonna jump back into a major event, and that's gonna be Civil War. And that one for me was just, I didn't really know exactly, like the cover looked epic. Like I was like, oh, what's gonna happen in this? And then I started reading it, and right off the bat, like those first couple of panels, the fight that has a lot of casualties, civilians, that just drew me in. And then what coincides after that, what comes after is just, it's captivating for me. And this, the whole dilemma, what side the heroes take stands on, like it was super interesting. Like the threat wasn't, I mean, obviously they were villains and incorporated, but it's like these people that were friends, these people that are teammates, co-workers, if you will, were like, didn't see eye to eye on it. So much to the point that they had to basically pick sides and basically fight.
Yeah, it was prophetic. It's basically America today.
Exactly.
But with that being said, Civil War is another one of those things that drew me back into comic books in one of those ways where I started buying. I remember Civil War came out and a friend of mine approached me and he's like, hey, you got to check out the series. Like, we got to get these books. And I'm like, I've been here before. I know what these crossovers are like. Yeah. You're always, everything is connected. And you make me buy a bunch of books and they're like thinly veiled and I really don't know what's going on. But for the most part, I remember buying the books that I was interested in and like, oh yeah, it's really affecting every book and every line to the point where it's like me, my brother, you guys, and my friend were like, all right, let's divide. Let's get every single Civil War time between all of us, and then we'll read each other's books. And then there was like, oh, but I don't want to get Wolverine by, Mark Guggenheim. We're like, no, you have to get it. It's connected. It wasn't. It really. But for the most part, it was like, I picked up Black Panther and I picked up Captain America. And it didn't just sell me on the Civil War event, but it sold me on those books where I went back and started collecting that. And then that's one of the books that I have here. I wrote down Captain America, but I think specifically that run by Brubaker. Like the one that starts with Winter Soldier and that goes into Civil War.
It's so good.
Yeah. And like issue 25 is the death of Captain America. And then you have Bucky ascending, as Cap. And that entire run is great.
Yeah.
And
that was a huge deal. I remember when like the issue with the death of Captain America, that made the news. That was everywhere. Yeah. Like everyone was talking about it. And yeah, I think those like, I feel like it was one of the times where it's like everyone's talking about comics.
Right.
Like it's on the news. Like Captain America's dead. Like,
yeah. We had that moment growing up in the 90s. It was the death of Superman. When Superman died, it was like on prime time, and everyone was talking about it, and there was a jump. And I experienced it again with the death of Cap to the point where it was like, oh, you can't get this issue before the comic book stores even opened up, And I have a terrible story from that time where like my brother was collecting Cap, and he had it in the box, and we had like a big fight about something, and then I took his Captain America 25 and I tore it up.
Oh my gosh!
And then I regretted it so much.
Because it was worth a lot, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, because it was skyrocketing. It was like, oh, you can't get it, so now it's worth $50 all of a sudden, like in 2 days, And it was like, and I had to like hustle to find a way to replace the issue, and
he must have been livid.
Yeah, but I made it up. I replaced it, and anyways, the price it stabilizes over time. Once it gets collected into paperback and all that. But yeah, it was a big deal. It was a big deal for many reasons.
Well, I'm gonna go back to the. It's still mainstream, but it feels like an indie graphic novel, and that for me is Matt Fraction's Hawkeye. I love that comic book.
Oh yeah,
it's so different compared to most like Avengers comic books. It's literally Hawkeye when he's not working for the Avengers. It's him in his time off.
Like his mundane.
Yeah, exactly. It's him taking care of the building he lives in. Like the main villain is a Russian. Tracksuit mafia. That all they say is bro. That's the main villain.
Sounds like Miami.
So I just love it. It's so funny. It's so cool. They have this one issue where it's just all about his dog and there's no dialogue.
Pizza dog.
Yes, and it's so amazing. I love it.
that's the kind of stuff that I'm like expecting from the Disney Plus series,
right? Yeah.
And I'm afraid that I'm like my expectations are too high, and I need to temper them because it's like I want Pizza Dog, I want like a silent issue, like a silent episode, you know. So I don't know how much we're gonna get.
I feel like with the Marvel shows, we always have expectations. Like no matter how much we try to downplay it, or I feel like, I mean, personally for me, I'm just always like, I feel like we're gonna get something good. Like WandaVision, we didn't know what we were gonna get, and I was like, I trust them. I think I enjoyed it for the most part.
Yeah. But I think with WandaVision, it was more like I don't know what I'm gonna get. I have like very specific, expectations for what should be in this because of that Hawkeye run, because it's so iconic. Yeah.
What about you, Gabe?
So coming up next on my list is going to be The Flash. It's going to be the return of Barry Allen. And so with this one, I feel that I really enjoyed, to disclosure, Barry Allen is probably my favorite Flash. Although the more I think about it, Wally is really climbing up there. I think a bit of the confusion for me as well is like with the modern shows and the modern adaptations. I feel like a lot of them kind of use Wally's personality, but give it Barry's name.
Yeah.
And for me, like I'm still trying to it's like I have to go back and just kind of like trying to see like, okay, which stories am I picking out? Because in The Return of Barry Allen, like that's kind of like Wally's like his coming of age story where he really steps out of Barry's shadow.
Yeah.
And because obviously he has his differences and there's something off about it. But Wally really comes into his own in this one. And that's why, like, for me, like this is up there for me.
Yeah. It's interesting that like that duality, it's so different who you see as Flash or as, some of these other characters, especially in DC where they have this like legacy patterns where they go through generations of it. Because like when I was growing up, Wally was Flash. Like one of the first comic book stories that I read was The Crisis. So like my introduction was Barry's dead, and it's like Wally. I grew up with him on the animated series, and then he was in the books, and like Green Arrow was dead, like Oliver Queen. Connor Hawke was Green Arrow. Kyle Rayner was Green Lantern. Like all that other stuff had passed. So it's like I had a whole different generation. So I had all those classic characters like reintroduced to me later. But yeah, it depends when you grow up, like how you define these characters and how they get like amalgamated over time.
Yeah, I grew up with the Justice League show, so to me, Flash is Wally West.
Yeah, I mean, looking back at it, I feel that my taste, like me kind of getting into comic books, obviously you guys had a huge influence in that. But like, again, going back to the DC animated, the movies, the shows, that really pushed me into like, okay, let's see like really where these characters are coming from. So like my perspective is kind of like from a animated film, TV show type of setting into the literature, the reading portion of it.
Okay, my next title, going back as we're back in tights and just tights, not capes, because it's again, I cheated. Daredevil. I just wrote Daredevil. Going back to what we talked about, like those foundational books of Batman, for me, I think the foundation is Miller. It's Frank Miller.
Yeah.
The stuff that he wrote. I remember we went to a comic book convention and I saw those Frank Miller visionary books. And like, I knew that like, oh, these books are really expensive. They were like $10 each. So I just like, I'm going to buy the whole run. So I got like Visionaries 1, 2, and 3 and just did a deep dive on that. And then it all clicked because I had read some of the like more modern Daredevil. And seeing what Miller wrote, a bunch of the stuff that I had read clicked. I'm like, oh, this is all a reference to that. So like going from Miller, that his early run to, Born Again when he returns and writes, to Man Without Fear, and then moving on to the modern stuff like the reboot with Kevin Smith. He did Guardian Devil, and then Bendis takes over, and then Bendis writes it for a long time, and that Bendis run is almost, it's immaculate.
Yeah, it is.
It's almost perfect. And so much of it is like, oh, the Gladiator from Miller's run. Oh, the Purple Man. And, and it just keeps throwing, keeps throwing. I mean, and then even Guardian Devil. Guardian Devil is almost like a sequel to Born Again.
Yeah.
And Born Again is probably the most iconic story. That's probably, if I had to choose one, again, so I'm not cheating if I choose one to be born again. And the fact that so much of that made it into like the Daredevil series on Netflix, and so many people were able to experience that. That's the best. And then that transition finally from Bendis to Brubaker.
Yeah, that's my favorite run right there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I also have Daredevil, and that's that transitioning part right there when when it's revealed that Daredevil is Matthew Murdock, and then he goes to jail.
Yeah.
And that scene where he's in jail, but so is Kingpin, and so is the Punisher, and so is Bullseye. Everyone's in jail apparently.
Yeah.
I just love that. That run, that part right there.
It's funny, like for once they got all of them behind bars like simultaneously.
Right.
Like, all of a sudden, it was a good year for law enforcement.
Yeah. And then we kind of see some of that in the show.
Yeah.
You know,
absolutely.
when the Punisher is in jail as well.
That scene.
Oh my goodness.
That was incredible.
That scene, he's just wearing white, and then at the end he's like all red.
Yeah,
all that blood. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna say this: I think the Daredevil show is the Dark Knight of all superhero shows.
Okay. I will hold back my comments for our television discussion. But
that's why I am saying I think it's the Dark Knight.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's a great show.
Yeah,
I think.
I'd put it up there.
More than a great show.
Related discussion.
Okay.
I just personally, when it comes to my shows, I don't have any something like that. So I just think it's like the best comic book show ever.
Okay, that's fair. That's not a hot take.
That's not a hot take.
I don't.
It's high praise.
Yeah, it's high praise. I think probably very few are gonna like balk at that. At least those who are familiar with the source material. All right, so you got Daredevil 2.
All right, so this is going to be the last one on my list, running off my list. This is a character that was graced by Ryan Reynolds in live-action film. One of possibly the greatest comic book movies, I think, to this day. And that character is Hal Jordan, Green Lantern.
Great movie. Great movie.
Fantastic, right?
Have you seen the movie? Yeah. You're not going to talk about Deadpool.
Yeah, got you there. So specifically, Rebirth, Green Lantern Rebirth, and that story for me, that's kind of like what recently pulled me back into comic books as well. I remember, I believe it was when you were picking up those issues. I believe it was of Daredevil, right? Mm-hmm. At the same convention, I picked up a load of those. My first convention. I was like buying my comic books with my own money, and I bought a bunch of Green Lanterns. And I remember only getting to a couple of them before there was a tragic incident where I believe my mother threw away all of my comic books. It was a very sad time.
That's unfortunately a tragedy that many comic book fans have experienced over time.
Nah, it was very. I was where's my stuff? I was like that John Travolta meme where he's just like, what's going on?
Like looking left to right.
Yeah. And so, no, but Rebirth, I really enjoy seeing Hal Jordan's redemption after becoming Parallax and just killing a bunch of Green Lanterns, and the team up with the other Lanterns that we know and love: Jon Stewart, Kyle Rayner, Guy Gardner, and Alan Scott. I think that was it was a huge moment, and definitely kind of what reeled me in recently back into comics.
Who is your favorite Green Lantern?
Hal Jordan.
Hal Jordan? Yeah. To me, it's Jon Stewart.
Jon Stewart's my second.
Because of the show.
Yeah, it's the animated series, right? Yeah. I they're like 1A and 1B.
I haven't read much Green Lantern. It's a character that I'm not really interested in, but I really enjoyed him in.
I kind of felt that way, like when I was growing up, because I was like, the cosmic stuff is not really my cup of tea. I know it's really big within the comic book industry, but that's the starting point. That's where you're.
Geoff Johns, right?
Yeah,
you can't go wrong with Geoff Johns.
And that's the thing, that he's so good at reintroducing a character for a new generation. It pays service to, like, if you've been reading this character for years, but it's a great jumping on point. And that's what I think he did with those Rebirth series during that time.
Yeah, because the stuff with Parallax and how he turned and all that was old. That was a while ago, and then he kind of brought it back. He made it relevant, and he kind of took it to new heights, in my opinion.
Yeah. Okay, well, my next title, and now we're talking, and like I have so many other titles that I'm like, oh, that should have been on my list. I guess I have a few honorable mentions, but I'll continue with what I have. V for Vendetta. I have V for Vendetta by Alan Moore. This is a good film, but it's a great graphic novel because it's one of those that was pivotal during my coming of age when I went from like as a childhood amusement to serious literature. And I think just the themes, the ideas, and I don't want to talk too much about it in case anyone hasn't, read it themselves. If you've seen the movie, you still haven't really experienced the story of the, so it's an interesting like remix, but just the book is so powerful. The themes, the ideas behind them. And I feel sometimes what people say about Watchmen, which I think is a great novel, but I didn't gravitate as much to it as many people do. That's how I feel about V for Vendetta. I'm like, oh, this is more like every little thing that he puts on the panel, like I just like dissect it and pour over it.
Is that his best for you?
For more, I would say so. I would say so.
The Killing Joke?
I would say just because like my weird bias of like Killing Joke's an amazing book, but it's about Batman and Joker, so it's like I don't know. V for Vendetta, number one, it's an original concept. So that seems like more creative to me, You could tell the best like Batman story, but it's a Batman story,
Nice Batman. Yeah.
Right, exactly. But just the world that he creates in V for Vendetta, and also how it's kind of established or structured, founded in our real world, that to me that's like a master stroke.
It's original and grounded.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, yeah, I would say that. Although Killing Joke is not far behind, I think that's a great book as well.
Just it has the pull of Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty much done with my list. You have one more? I can give a recommendation, an honorable mention in mine, I guess.
Okay. Do you have any left on your list, or you may have
because you cheated because you said Daredevil.
That's right. And that makes me move through it much slower, right?
So I guess my honorable mention, one of them would be Deadpool, Dead Presidents.
Oh, really?
Yes, hilarious. I love it. It's hilarious.
I never made it that far into Deadpool.
I haven't read the
You own them. That's how.
I know. I
That's how
own them because I own. Well, here's my story with Deadpool. I was obsessed with Deadpool, and this I guess this will go into one of my honorable mentions because I didn't think about it when I made the list, and
you
now
get an honorable mention.
Yeah,
you're still on the list.
Okay, but Deadpool I collected 1 through 69. I had the Circle Chase, the 4-issue miniseries. I had New Mutants 98, his first appearance. I had like every issue that Deadpool ever appeared in. I chased this, and then what I think is the best series, at least in my experience reading, was Cable Deadpool. That series is so good. The art is so beautiful. It's done by Yu Don, who do the Street Fighter stuff. And it's a contrast because it's silly like Deadpool, but it's serious and gritty like Cable, and that's the best contrast. But then they made like 800 Deadpool when he blew up and he started being all over everyone, and I couldn't keep up. So those early years, like I do buy a bunch of those series, and I didn't get to read all of them.
So no, I can love that story. It's if you haven't read it, I recommend it. It's hilarious. It's literally so someone brings back the dead presidents, and Deadpool has to fight the dead president's zombies, along with his companion, the ghost of Benjamin Franklin. That's it. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, you got me.
Okay, so we're downloading it now then. All right. Then I guess I'll round out my list. I have Will Eisner's A Contract with God, which is, again, I guess when I made this list, I thought, what are the things that took me to that next level of comic book reading and like what I think of as serious literature? And this was so different. It was a story about real people in a real world, Depression era, themes of religion, themes of socioeconomic inequality, and just like the human struggle and the spirit. It's in sepia tone, so it's all like brown on white. And I had read some of Eisner's The Spirit comic strips, growing up. Yeah. And like that art style was great. And then to see almost like the Eisner touch is in the book. So it's clearly Eisner, but completely different. Like I could see how like, oh, you can do this and you can do that. Like an artist can just, run the gamut, like a range. And for me, A Contract with God, if anyone hasn't read it, A Contract with God trilogy, specifically that first book, A Contract with God. All right. You guys have any other honorable mentions?
I feel like they were on your list, so.
No, okay.
I mentioned
So it was
everything.
like, yeah, because it's like sometimes.
You took everything.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Come on.
No,
I
it's
just-
okay. We covered it.
Yeah, we covered it. Yeah, yeah.
It was mentioned.
Yeah.
And I'll mention something because I think neither of you guys have read it. Okay, because it came up when we were talking about Batman. The Question, that entire series, it is existential. That the Vic Sage run by Denny O'Neil is, I was like Taoism and just it's spiritual, and I think that's at the crux what we've talked about. Like, and that's what I kind of thought of when I went over my list. We're talking about searching for that driving force in it. And that's what I was thinking about when I put my list together: a contract with God, the Spirit, and the Question. And I'd highly recommend you guys check it out if you haven't already. So
Yeah. All right. So for the viewers that are listening, let's recommend one graphic novel from our list for them so they could read during the summer. So I'll start off. For me, I recommend you read Hawkeye, Matt Frackkin's run. It's hilarious. It might even it might be included in the new Hawkeye show that's coming. Is it coming out this year?
yeah, it's this year. It's
This
this
summer?
fall.
This
Yeah,
fall?
and it's supposed to be inspired by it.
Okay. So check it out. It's great. It's hilarious. You will love it. What about you, Gabe?
My pick would be Green Lantern Rebirth. I think that, we have the Batmans, and that should be required reading for a lot of people.
Right.
Mhm.
So one for me, I like you said, like you weren't necessarily into the cosmic stuff, but I feel like Jeff Johns does an incredible job. So I want to recommend Green Lantern Rebirth.
Yeah, and I guess I kind of jumped the gun on that topic because it's the question. You have no idea how hard it was for me to collect all these single issues over the years because they like only printed them once. They were never collected. They have been collected in the past couple of years. So if you can get a hold of those paperbacks, The Question, or digital, because now obviously you can get any comic book ever online. So check it out. That whole run by Denny O'Neil.
There you go. Now you have some summer reading to do. All right, guys. Well, see you next week when we talk about our top 5 favorite video games.
I'm looking forward to that one.
I'm looking forward to that one too. All right, guys. Take care. Spike your hair.
Till next time.